overcome a filibuster. Joining me now is the Democratic Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of Ohio. She's chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She's a member of the Financial Services Committee. As I mentioned at the top of the show, she was in the room with Joe Biden for the historic Juneteenth signing and actually received one of the Biden pens, which, Congresswoman, is going to go down in history. That is a really, really important moment. But it is an important symbolic moment in American history at a time when there are very not symbolic things going on to limit those hard-earned rights to vote.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. We are right here during the week of Juneteenth, and you're absolutely right. To stand in the White House and have the president, along with so many of my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus and other members, be there for the signing of something we fought so hard for. When you think about 1863 and 1865 and how far we've come, but we still have a lot of work to do, as you're talking about, with the voting rights and so many other things. But to be able to say that Juneteenth is now a national holiday is not only symbolic, but when you think back of all of those individuals who fought so hard and who were yet enslaved and didn't have many of the opportunities we have today. But then think about it. We're still fighting for voting rights. So this is certainly a first step, but it is not the end step, because you have to look at, if you cannot acknowledge the past, how can we move forward in the future?
You know, Roland Martin of Texas was on my show yesterday, and he made the point that if these, other than the 14 Republicans who didn't vote for the passing of this bill, everybody else did in the House and the Senate. And he says, look, the logical extension is that if you voted to acknowledge that slavery ended, there was a bit of a delay in letting some of the enslaved people know that, but if you voted to acknowledge that, then you are acknowledging that they deserve the right to vote, that there should be no impediment. Every American should equally deserve the right to vote as guaranteed to them by the Constitution, which has been reinterpreted over the years to mean absolutely every citizen. In some ways, the symbolism of it should lead to a more rational approach to dealing with these state prohibitions and restrictions on voting.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, and I agree with Roland Martin, but I think you hit the key. You know, if you look at rational people, we should have had it unanimous just as the Senate did. But I do think that's a good start of argument for us. When you think about, I look at it as the glass half full, that it was only 14 who did not vote for it. I think that gives us grounds as we go into bringing before the Congress, the House, and the Senate legislation for the voting rights. I think it puts us in a very good place. I think when you look at all the principles that we're fighting for, when you look at history, when you look at what is due and what the American people overall want. So I think when we look at the people are going to be on our side, we're making compromises already. We have solid legislation, and we also believe we'll have the courts on our side.
You spoke about history. In February, you put forth legislation, which was previously introduced by Marcia Fudge, about the black history being American history. This has become, to me, it would have been obvious, and to a lot of Americans, that's obvious. To a lot of Americans, it is an absolute offense. This has been the basis of the fight against the 1619 Project. It's been the basis of the fight against critical race theory. And in fact, it has been so much misunderstood by some of your colleagues in the House and the Senate, going around saying that they are teaching little white children to hate themselves. There is no critical race theory being taught to little children at all. But tell me about the importance of this legislation and why we need to fundamentally understand that there is a complete history of America, not just the history that many students learn.
I think you hit it on the nail. It is so important for us to make sure that people understand that although we celebrated in February, we should be celebrating this the entire year because it is history. It happens to be Black Americans in American history. It's no different than anything else that we study. So I think it's important for us to bring it to the attention because so many people think it as being isolated. Children need to know about American history and how important it was for Black Americans. As I look at the picture of our Capitol, it's important for people to know that that Capitol, that White House, was built by slaves. It's important to know when we think about all of the great healthcare, all the scientific things that we have, that Black Americans played a huge role in everything that we do today. And I think it will give them what I call the Rosa Parks theory, that people will understand that one woman made a change, that now we have things that are integrated. But for that Black American, but for Martin Luther King, but for all of the scientists and the educators who were Black Americans making American history. We don't separate it when we need something that a Black American has been part of. Think about COVID-19 and think about Dr. Kizzy Corbett, a young Black female who was a major part of coming up with the vaccination. We don't then say that's only a Kizzy vaccination for Black people. We all take it. And that is the value of the bill that I am so honored to introduce following Congresswoman, now Secretary Fudge of HUD.
Congresswoman, good to talk to you. It is the first opportunity we've had to talk since the passing of your husband, and I just want to note your husband was part of Black history, American history in this country. He was first elected to the Ohio State House in 1979. That was not a common thing in Ohio. That was not a common thing in America at the time. So our thoughts to your husband and other trailblazers like him, because Black history is American history.
Thank you. And today is for him, so I appreciate that more than you know.
Congresswoman Joyce Beatty is the Democrat from Ohio, and she is the chair of the Congressional Black